Hey, what's up guys, it's Samuel G. Here I am. I want to talk some more about 7C second edition. I want to focus more on the idea of consequences and opportunities, and the structure of the idea of sequences in 7C. So the basic, the chapter that is called Action and Drama in the book. So right now I'm in the GM's chair, and I have the responsibility as the GM to create on the fly consequences and opportunities. So this is the part that I really like. One of the part that I really like with this system is that first, it's improv heavy, in the sense of sometimes you really need to come up with stuff out of the blue, and that's a good challenge. That's a good workout for a GM or a role player in general. So that I like, because the thing is that sometimes the player wants to have an intention. So the player wants to let's say jump a rooftop to rooftop, and so this is a risk. This is not a sequence, this is a risk. It's a basic skill check, but it's really complicated. It's not just your typical skill check. It's not just the idea of a task resolution. You do it, you can't have it, you have it or you don't, or even if you fail forward, it's not even like that. There's a whole procedure, there's a protocol about it. And this protocol, this is what makes 7C special. It's the idea of, it's also the moment where the player gets his full agency, because he chooses how he wants to spend his raises. Doesn't have to spend the raises in an optimal way. And Jason gave a good example of that in his game with me when we played, and in the game we played together, and also in his video when he described that. So the idea is that let's say I want to jump from rooftop to rooftop. So this is a risk. You're gonna use, let's say, athletic and brawn, or athletic and finesse, depending on, Sometimes I feel, as a GM, this is not described well in the book. I didn't read it a lot. I didn't read it so thoroughly, but sometimes I think the player can get to decide which attribute he's gonna use. I think it's called a threat. Which threat he's gonna use, depending on how he wants to approach the situation. But the skill is always going to be, I think, the skill is always going to be on the GM to decide, which create that edge. But sometimes the GM impose a risk on the player to create tension, or just because the situation, appeals to it, calls to it. And this is when the GM, reinforce a certain threat, and sometimes it's a threat that the player doesn't have, right? So this is where it becomes interesting. Now, on another hand, then you get to, as the GM, you get to, once the approach is decided, you get to come up with consequences and opportunities, if so. It says in the book that you don't have to always have opportunities. Sometimes it doesn't, it doesn't show up, doesn't feel like it. But sometimes it's really interesting and really appropriate, and depending on what you want to do and where you want to go with the scene. I think that the mechanic in 7C is imply a certain scene framing, because this procedure of going by the consequences and the opportunities gets to be chosen, gets to be determined by the player's choice, the way he wants to spend his raises, which create eventually in the narration a scene framing situation where the player gets to choose how he wants the scene to occur. And this is magic to me. This is perfect because the GM has a clear and defined role of setting up the stage, like providing the player with different opportunities, different choices, and then the player, after he uses the mechanic, after he rolls the dice, and after the randomness of the dice spoke, he gets to use his agency and say, this is how I want that to happen. And it would be easy to say, hey, I will always do the most optimal thing, right? The most optimal thing, which is, you know, not getting any damage, getting what I want, and you know. But it's way more interesting than that, because it doesn't have to be that way. You can choose worst, you know, you can choose bad and see how it's gonna be interesting afterward, and that's really nice. That's really cool. Now, the idea of consequences and opportunities also imply in the philosophy of the game, or the style of gameplay that the game provides or propose, that consequence matters. And that's really important for a game that to reinforce that. I've learned that with Burning Wheel, because Burning Wheel is all about that. And I realized that with a game that doesn't have a mechanic to reinforce the importance of consequences, that kind of vision of what a role-playing game is or should be stand on the shoulder of the GM and the players to, you know, come back with stuff, you know, create consequences out of the blue. Because with a system with a simple task resolution, you have it or you don't. If you fail, it's over. The failure was the failure. And so if there's gonna be a consequence for your player or not, or for the story or not, lies on how you're gonna deal with it as players, you as people around the table. And when it falls down on the shoulder of people like that, sometimes you forgot, sometimes you just don't want to deal with it, so you just, you know, you just go over it. And you know, this is when sometimes you do things that would have consequences, but you know, finally nothing happened really, and you don't go to jail, or you don't get a bad rep, or you know, you don't lose friends, or whatever, right? So yeah, so that's what I like with 7C in terms of the consequences, the opportunities. Now, in terms of you know what it is, it's hard though. It's not easy. You get a lot of used to, and gets also some practice, because it forces you to have a narrative structure. So you're gonna narrate in the risk, then you're gonna switch mode, become a little bit become a little bit meta, where you're gonna talk about consequences and opportunities and roll the dice and spend the raises. And then once that is done, which doesn't have to be really long, it's not a heavy, complicated thing, then the player gets to narrate the outcome. And now it's nice for the player, because it's easy to narrate since you know what's happening. You don't come up with it on the fly. It's a teamwork. The GM needs to come with the consequences on the fly and the opportunities on the fly, which is the hard work, if I may. And then the player gets to hear what the GM has to say, and then by choosing what he wants, is structuring his narration to come. And that is dope, because and Jason mentioned it, is because it allows the people who have difficulty narrating, or have difficulty come up with cool things. Well, now you have a structure, so you can just go all into your narration. And it was really fun in our game, because Jason actually, you know, he's a good narrator. You know, he has this ability. He's one of the best I've played with. And he's like now that he has a structure, he's even better, right? Because now he knows exactly what he has to narrate, so he can. Now his challenge for him is not to come up with over things, like stuff that was not agreed on, kind of thing. But otherwise, I mean, it's really cool mechanic. I mean, so now. For me, my challenge is that in the book they say, you know, wounds is always good as consequences. So wounds kind of need to be there all the time somehow. So at least one of the consequences should be tiredness, wounds, damage somehow. Good consequences could be something like a reputation. Now you get some bad rep or you get noticed for something and it sticks with you. Equipment, but at the same time, equipment in this game is not really important. It's not a gear game. It's not like a cyberpunk game or a sci-fi game where gear is important, or maybe a medieval game. So it's not necessarily gear, but you know, weapon could be interesting because with no weapon, changes a little bit of the damage you can give, but not so much because the game is not super detailed about that. But maybe special items, important items like a key or a map or a letter for someone or a jewel or anything that is dear to the character, that can be a good consequence. You know, all kinds of stuff that related to what's going on. So that's interesting consequences, but it has to make the life of the player harder. Because if it's too generic, the player won't care so much. It will spend the raise on another part. And also you need to come up with enough things, like enough consequences and opportunities to create a good balance with the raises, the number of raises, because in this game, that's the thing though, sometimes I feel like the players get so much raises that, I mean, I need to come up with so many things to create a good balance, otherwise it's too easy. And too easy is not always fun, right? So it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard because there is a lot of free dices, lots of hero points, and a lot of stuff like that that makes the life so easy. And then, you know, you also have like special rules where the rank of your skill, when you reach a certain number, like the dices explodes and all kinds of stuff. So that's why the GM has something called a danger pool, which I'm going to talk maybe in another video, but yeah. So I like that. Now, in terms of opportunities is good for story plot, story element. You bring something special. You attract the attention of the player for him to invite him to spend the raise on that opportunity. But then you need, since you came up with it on the fly, you kind of need to think fast and come with some good stuff. So that's why I do think that 7th Sea 2nd edition, because of the nature of that mechanic, a lot of shared narration is important, just to give the GM time to think. And so that's why the players in this game should or need even to narrate as much as the GM. Like half of the narration should come from the player, so therefore the GM has time to think. Just yeah. So that's what I think. Now we play solo, so we don't have a good example. It's a good game for solo. It works well for solo. But if we were more players, the thing like action sequences and drama sequences would be a little bit more heavy, because many players gets to spend raises, but they don't spend all their raises one by one. They spend a few, then they say, I'm gonna wait, see how the scene goes. So other people, so the next player maybe spend one raise, another one might say, no, I'm not spending raise, I'm waiting on something. Another one spend all his raises, then he gets vulnerable a little bit, kind of thing, because we need to finish everybody's raises before going to another round kind of thing. So it becomes a really intricate situation in terms of remembering the number of raises. The player has to do that for sure, because the GM can't remember all that. GM needs to follow the sequence. So since we haven't done those in a group, it's hard for me to figure out how it is. But we did it like I played the villain and we had a fight. A fight is an action sequence, which is different from a risk, you know, since it's like a series of risk. But in the context of a scene, a different kind of and it's kind of complicated. The combat is I mean, it's not complicated. It's just it needs some use to. It's not a combat system. It's an action sequence. So many things can happen. But for every risk a character or a player takes, you need consequences and opportunities all the time. It's not just about dealing wounds all the time. And so sometimes it's, you know, you need to think about how are we gonna do this. So anyway, yeah, I would have a lot of things to say about that, but I'm gonna speak a little bit more about this mechanic later on. But I wanted to talk about opportunities and consequences, because I do think that's what makes this game really modern and standing out from the other ones in this kind of category of games. All right, so thank you for watching. Talk to you soon. Oh, hey, if you play 7th Sea 2nd edition, please let me know, how do you do the consequences? How do you do the opportunities? How do you create the balance between the raises, the consequences, and the opportunities, and coming up with stuff on the fly, and how do you deal with all that in the context of an action sequence? All right, talk to you soon.